Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you.
Happy Monday, sir.
Well, very good. Something happened on Friday. Not to our great surprise that significant events can happen at the end of the legislative day or in the middle of a snowstorm.
Yeah.
But something did significantly happen, and fortunately it did get a little bit of publication, in the media. That doesn't mean that they're on the right side of this issue. They may be pumping it up, but we see this as a concern. And that is what the great Senate leader, Republican leader, has done. And he's never been on the side of liberty. So you have to be suspicious what he is up to. And he certainly isn't anywhere close to us on foreign policy. So, as you already know, what he did was he introduced a resolution, a joint joint resolution with the House to give more power to the president, authority to use military force. And this brings up a debate. So the debate is going on. It's been going on for a year, and some people use, the Constitution. That was in the old days. Some people use the authority to go to war from 2001, directed mainly at Al Qaeda, the part that committed the crime against on 9/11. Others, unfortunately, just do what they want anyway, and they don't care about this. And you have people saying one thing and then offering legislation on another thing. So it's really a mess. But I'd like to see how well we can simplify this and try to warn people what this means, because it's a bold step. And I want to just ask you about this and where you think it's going. What do you think the odds are? Do you think they're just floating this out there to see if there's more than just 6 of us opposed to giving the president more power, or whether there's more that will support us and that we can wake up the American people?
Well, Congress is in a bind because on the one hand, they want to say that they're relevant when it comes to foreign policy. They want to pretend they're exercising their oversight responsibilities. But on the other hand, they don't want to take any responsibility for presidential foreign policy that may go wrong. So they want to be able to tell the president, go ahead and do the wars, because he's asked them for authority. He's challenged them in a way to fulfill their constitutional duties, not exactly how you would have it done, but he's asked them to give him permission to do it, although of course he said, I don't need it anyway, but if you feel better, go ahead and do it. So what they do is they propose this resolution that will essentially operate as a total blank check. I mean, we thought 2001 authorization was bad enough. This is a blank check. Go after ISIS anywhere, everywhere. There's no limitations on troops, on money, on geographic location. This really is an absolute green light for war.
They refer back and distort, the resolution right after 9/11, but they also use the authorization, which we were very much involved in the debate, and that was the authorization to go into Iraq. So they want to use Iraq to militarize the world and go any place they want, including the United States, if there's a suggestion that you have any relationship at all, maybe a phone call, who knows what, with ISIS. But this to me is a bit of a farce. Of course, the authorization isn't there. So it would be good for the debate to have it. It would be good for them to clarify exactly what they want, and it would be good to see it soundly defeated. And that, I think, is part of their worry, is that if they had an open debate and it was a clear-cut declaration, give the president this power and have an up and down vote, which I don't think will happen because they probably can't pass and there'd be arguments against it. But I think it'd be good to have the debate and then see what we can do to help defeat it, like we worked on when the president proposed the initiation of the bombing in Syria, which he knew he didn't have the votes, but he went and did it anyway.
Eventually,
so I mean, it ended up doing the whole thing. So this is where we are. But I think it's very important that we keep a close eye on this.
I think this is where people might say to you, what are you complaining about? You say you want Congress to take, to get involved and to give authorizations and not. And here they propose an authorization, and you're complaining about it, without seeing the bigger context of what they are actually doing.
Well, yeah. I mean, if they wanted to have a debate on the war issue, recall when it came up before for the International Affairs Committee, on which I sat when we discussed the going into Iraq, I was sort of glad they were debating and at least pretending that the Congress was participating. I said, but you're not debating the right thing. You want to go to war. You don't go to war by saying, and more or less said, let's just support the president. He had the final say.
Yeah.
He'll decide whether the war is really necessary or not. So that is not the proper way to go. It should have been, and I offered the resolution.
Yeah.
Up and down vote on declaration of war. And remember how they mocked that and said that, it was just ridiculous. It was just putting a monkey wrench in their plans. But we actually ended up getting a recorded vote on that just to put them on the line for being such hypocrites.
Yeah, whether they would vote for war or not. Remember, they had some crazy thing about how the insurance kicks in a funny way if you declare war, and we can't do it that. I could never follow that discussion.
Yeah, and the person that challenged me on that was now chairman of the committee. So he got promoted. But the other time about when I said that there's been no aggression committed against us by the Iraqi people and the government, and remember the one Congress said, "Oh, well, Dr. Pearl, we know you're an expert on this." But they've been committing aggression against it. They've been shooting at our airplanes when we were dropping bombs on their country. So that's the way they think. And of course, I'd like to reverse a lot of that. But we wonder whether or not these people are really serious and what they're really up to, because I think they'll do what they want anyway. Resolution or no resolution, even before 9/11, there was so much warmongering going on. I mean, and overthrowing governments and secret government, the CIA. So we need truth out there and a revelation so that the American people know what's going on instead of waiting until this major crisis occur, because it's a little bit scary to think that if they had an up and down vote, people have been terrified, about ISIS, even though the threat of ISIS is so overblown. Somebody did a study and they showed that between 2005 and 2015, there were like 24 people killed by terrorists in this country, where there are 50 killed every night in our inner cities, and those lives don't matter.
Yeah. As bad as it was in the Bush administration, in terms of warfare, you had a resolution in 2001, flawed as it was. You had one in 2002 on Iraq, flawed as it was. But President Obama has simply taken the country to war without even bothering to consult Congress.
And Congress says nothing.
Congress says nothing. And your weekly column this week points out that really the president should have been impeached for invading Libya without even bothering to ask for authority. And Congress is back and does nothing. But the U.S. has been acting in Iraq and in Syria without authorization for at least for almost a year now. We saw reports over the weekend. It's actually been a very busy weekend on that front too. First of all, there are these reports that the U.S. has taken an air base in eastern Syria. And then you had Ashton Carter, the defense secretary, saying there will be boots on the ground. Well, what does that mean? We don't have a status of forces agreement with Iraq. We certainly don't have permission to go into Syria. And then Biden said over the weekend that if these talks in Geneva fail, these Syria peace talks in Geneva fail, we may have to go full on with a military intervention. So something is cooking, I think.
Yeah, and right now, the president's taken a position, the American people have taken a position. They don't want another Iraq war and having the body bags come back and all the killing. So they want to make it sterile and just drop bombs. But if this resolution passed that McConnell's proposed, he can go, a president can go any place, any time, including in the United States, and put boots on the ground any place. So it does open up the door for putting troops into Syria. And I think what's going on here is that they've lost the war. When we started in 2011, when it was explicit, let's get rid of Assad, I think we totally lost. I think they're just really annoyed that the Russians came in. They were invited in, of course, by the government. But that means if they do go in, the odds jump up tremendously that the confrontation could very well be between two superpowers, the United States and Russia.
Now, there was a great point, I think, made in a Zero Hedge piece about this whole thing over the weekend. And the point was, because Carter said, we are going to take Raqqa, the ISIS capital in Syria. We're going to take that with the 101st Airborne Division. So Zero Hedge pointed out, so then what? So if they do and they get there and they bomb it and they take it, then what? Do they move on westward toward Damascus, the U.S. military? And what happens if they face the Russians face to face? I mean, what is the game plan? What is the end game? You're sitting here in the middle of eastern Syria holding ISIS's stronghold. You've got the Kurds to the north, the Russians and the Syrians to the west.
The other thing about this resolution is it's on fast track. Usually they use that term, with trade agreements. But this is sort of fast track for the Senate. They have a rule. If the leader introduces legislation and invokes the rule, Rule 14, it means that the committee system is totally ignored, and that's it. And they can bring it to the floor anytime they want. So who knows what's coming on? Maybe they don't know. Maybe there'll be something. They'll have an excuse. But they're getting prepared with that. It wouldn't take much. He could bring that up today, and have an up and down vote on it. If there was a bombing which terrified everybody and they were able to milk it, they could do this, and the people unfortunately may roll over because the consensus now, unfortunately, we're losing the intellectual argument that the government's not supposed to be there to provide perfect safety for all citizens. As a matter of fact, the word safety isn't even in the Constitution, but they have a responsibility for defense. So there's a lot of responsibility placed on the courts and the Congress and the executive branch to protect our freedoms, to protect our liberties, to restrain the government, to not go to war very easily. But no, the American people say, no, it's very important that we're safe, whether it's economic safety and security or whether it's physical security. We heard it so often after 9/11 that under these conditions, you must sacrifice liberty. And I have frequently said, and very pleased to get a good consent from many young people, that you never have to sacrifice liberty in order to be safe and secure. And on the long run, of course, it's been said that you lose both instead.
You've suggested a couple times during this conversation the idea that this authorization could pertain to U.S. soil. It makes you wonder what would happen if there were another one or two San Bernardinos here, how quickly they said these people were tied to ISIS. They would say that's a conspiracy theorist, but with this authorization passing, you can imagine the use of drones on U.S. soil? I mean, military troops in U.S. cities?
Let's talk a little bit about the recent report that came out, though it was not a surprise. It's the information has been there if you look for it, and that is the fact that those Saudis, are actually providing weapons. And of course, we without authorization, we're at war against Yemen by being a close ally with the Saudi Arabians. And what they're doing is now we support Saudi Arabia, and I found out that they use a lot of money and weaponry.
They've been financing the CIA war in Syria. The CIA has been training and recruiting a lot of groups, eventually ending up to be radical Islamists, and the Saudis have been writing the checks. It kind of reminds you of some of the Iran-Contra-like things that we saw back in the 80s. But here's an ultimate irony. We were talking about this a little bit earlier. These talks are supposed to start in Geneva, these peace talks. The U.S. and Saudis together have insisted that this special high negotiating committee be the sole representatives of the opposition in Syria. Well, the leader of that group is a member of the Army of Islam, which has fought alongside al-Qaeda in Libya. So the U.S. is using the 2001 authorization to go to war against al-Qaeda to push al-Qaeda as a negotiating partner. It's very confusing.
It is very confusing. You have to work hard to keep it straight. So you can imagine how easy it is for the average American eyes to be glazed over. And you don't hear this discussion at the presidential debates at all. It's all demagoguery about who's the toughest, who's going to drop the most bombs the fastest, and who's going to take care of ISIS. But this whole idea that Saudi and Americans are sending money to Al-Qaeda now they want this more authority to fight Al-Qaeda and, of course, ISIS, and because we thought that they would do the business of getting rid of Assad for us, and it looks like we're failing all the way around. We didn't get rid of Assad. It's expanding. It's costing more money. And now we're giving up more liberties here at home and giving more power to the president to do more harm. And it is rather tragic, because I still have this firm belief, if the American people have the information that they're pro-peace. Most people are pro-peace, but they get converted by the radical propaganda of the enemy's coming, build up the fear and scare people, and then they say, you have to take care of us.
Yeah. Well, this is the poster child for non-interventionism, the mess we're seeing there.
Yeah, that is for sure. A non-intervention has a ways to go, but it's still the only way to go. And the effort that we put out has to continue, because I truly believe that the American people, if they have the right information, will vote against the war. Unfortunately, they were against the Vietnam War, but after how many years and how many deaths were there? 60,000 deaths. And finally, the streets erupted in this country and they became anti-war. And the same thing with Korea. It takes a lot of killing to become anti-war. And after 8 years of Bush, the country, at least on the surface, became anti-war. And the current president has learned how to fight wars and not be so apparent about it. And once again, the last thing in the world we need is to give a president more power than he already has taken, he and all the other presidents have taken. And why our position shouldn't be, all Americans should agree, that they should have less power to wage war, and we should be more honest about the real danger and understand why in the world there is this thing called blowback. And if people understood this, then maybe we wouldn't have these tens of thousands of troops scattered across the Middle East and around the world. And now, what is the mantra on the debates right now? We have to rebuild the military. Rebuild the military. And we have the strongest military. That's one thing that we do well. We have a strong military, used unwisely. But we don't need to rebuild the military, especially when you think of that. All they'll do is they'll want to use it. But looking toward non-intervention, the Constitution could go a long way to solving our problems. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report, and please come back soon.